Awesome. Fantastic. So anyway, I'm here to talk about Hague Park experiments, which partly because, of course, the fabulous Abelia Tate and I worked on this project together. But for those of you who don't know about this park, just going to give you a little bit of history. So this park is in Canberra and it was planted very early on in the city's history in 1921, between 21 and 23, as a shelter belt, because as you can see in this space here, there aren't many trees. And so they were trying to build, and it was just basically a giant dust bowl. And so they put in these non-native trees, fast growing, now most of them considered weeds in the ACT, but they're still there. And it's actually very long. So it's 1.8 kilometres long and 145 metres wide. And if you have a look here, it's basically just lines of trees. So there's 14 rows with 9 species. And when they first planted it, there was 7,000 trees, but now there's about 2,300. So it was planted, you can see it here, it was planted quite close to the inner city. So it's in Canberra's inner north. And so it's like a little bit away from our city centre. So even though it was originally built just as a shelter belt, the very fact that it was in the inner city, and as you can see, you know, all of the suburbs building up around it, it became a public park in 1987. And then because it is a rare example of a wind belt, it was listed on ACT Heritage Register. There is a predicted growth in the ACT population between, these stats are actually a little bit old, but between 2022 and 2058. So growing by about 300,000, which is quite significant for this town. And so the ACT government commits to making 70% of this growth in the population infill, which means that this area in the inner north needs to densify. So if you know anything about Canberra, it's Ryan's experienced it, it's extremely spread out, lots of single residential, big garden, big plots of land. And because of this, the government realises that Hague Park is a critical public green space. People need it as their backyard. Okay, that's all fine and good, except that Hague Park is considered the most unsafe park in Canberra. So on the Canberra Women's Safety Map, it's pinned as the most unsafe park. It's a centre for illegal activity, dangerous activity, but also just illicit activity. So it was a beat in the 1980s and 1990s. It was nicknamed Rape Park. And then during the day, it's also incredibly underutilised because there's no amenity there. There's just these lines of trees and it is very dark, so it is quite forest-like. So the government wants to basically turn this place from, the most unsafe place in Canberra to a backyard for the inner city where, the local community can, exercise, play, and also to turn it into an active travel route. And then an even bigger dream is a place that actually community loves, doesn't just use, but loves. So it's a big leap from, like one of the most hated parks to a place that everybody loves. So this fantastic company called Tate Network undertook a utilisation study in 2017 just to get a sense of the baseline, what's happening there. And they found that this, 2-kilometre park had more people just moving through it than spending time in it. Most of the people who used the park were males, and the only activity that was happening in there was dog walking because it was an off-leash dog park. So people took their dogs in there, but it was very underutilised considering the scale of the park and considering the density around it already. And then, less than a quarter of users were children or elderly people. So the government also undertook a lot of consultation, reached out to community, and between the work that was done by Abelia's company and the government consultation, they formed this Hague Park Place Plan, which became very trendy in Canberra. I don't know if they're trendy elsewhere, but the Place Plan was a very trendy thing here. They've calmed down about them now. But the idea about a place plan is actually to distill what it is that community would like to see in this place, pull out some key principles and visions, and then try to build on those. So this is actually not top-down, but community-led. Government wanted this strange park to become a great place or park that is truly representative of the community who uses it, an active and reflective place geared towards recreation, relaxation and pleasure. So that's the vision. So they put out a tender for something called the Hague Park Experiments in 2019. They took all of that data and the place plan, and it was sort of a once-in-a-lifetime proposition from the ACT government because it was a $1 million budget, which in ACT terms is huge, enormous. It was 6 months. And the main thing about it was that we had 6 months to temporarily activate the park. So no permanent infrastructure, no permanent act, just test and trial based on the Hague Park Place Plan, what people would like to see in this park, and then feed that back to the government for more permanent change or renewal. So I led this consortium because I realised there wasn't anyone in town who could do this by themselves. It was quite a project and it had a very small time frame. And so we went multidisciplinary. So UC led the project just because in the end it was a research project, as in we were evaluating, testing and trialling. And so we built that framework for the project. But then we had Tate Network working on infrastructure and project management. We had a fantastic arts centre working with us as well on the programming. And then we had somebody working on events and also communication. So we had a bit of a task here. We had to improve community perception of this place, which was quite poor. And importantly, diversify the people that were visiting the space, and then extend the diversity of people using the space, but also the different ways in which people could use the space, not just walking through it or walking their dog, and also hold people in this place longer. And then to take it one step further, and this was the 6 months, but it was with $1 million, to try and give community a sense of stewardship over this place that was, mostly unloved and unused. So it was a big ask for us, and we almost died doing it, Abelia, but it was fantastic at the same time. It was all worth it.
That is a fantastic photo of Chris. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's great.
That's great. Awesome.
Yeah.
It was a big project, Cathy. You did well. Carry on.
Okay. Yeah, it was extreme, Hope. So what did we do? We really focused on not just events and activities, but some of these core principles, core placemaking principles and community development approaches. So we focused on two kinds of placemaking. One was everyday placemaking and the other one was creative placemaking, and both of these played a critical role in the success of the project. We also used the asset-based community development framework, which is that you look at the strengths rather than the weaknesses of a space. So, one thing we could have done was we could have said, all right, let's, this is Rape Park, so let's put in CCTV and, let's put in security and that will make people feel safer. But we decided, no, we'll take this other approach, which is let's grow organically this place. And so that was, I'll give you a couple of examples of that and the unique qualities of place. So we did 26 experiments. I'm not going to run through them at all, but just to show you the breadth and depth of what we did. And all of them targeted different elements that we'd kind of identified through the Hague Park Place Plan as problematic. Some targeted space and, the issues in the park, we focused on litter reduction. Others focused on on demographics like kids. So you can see the long list of all the activities we did, many in the 6 months. It was quite something. Some were small scale, but the main thing that we focused on in this project is you can run an event, you can have a huge event, but actually once it's gone, the place remains the same. And so we did a lot of seeding of everyday placemaking. So we had granular and meaningful engagements. And at the start, we had what we called the caretakers of the park. And they were actually artists, most of them wandering through the park in pairs, just saying hi to people and collecting data, just to give people a sense that there are humans in the park who care. So we started with dogs because we already knew they were the big asset. We ran a project like Humans of New York, but it was Dogs of Hague Park, and we collected the stories about dogs and their owners. And every time I talk about it, I get a goosebump to this day, because as it turns out, heaps of them were rescue dogs, and some of them actually basically were rescued their owner just from loss and sadness. And so we had those posters up and about. And then we started running these Hague Park paw parties, and they run every month to this day. They are so popular. And then we built the dogs, this agility equipment, which the kids used as well, of course. No one else knows how to play and make a space joyful like children. And so they were one of our main target demographics, because of course families came in after that. We had fairy gardens under the trees. We put in infrastructure for them. We had a play outside day. It's a model we still use all over Canberra now. We built them a kids bike pump track and also a nature play. So we just really wanted to welcome community into the park. We tested and trialled some things. Some things were great and went well, and some things were a bit of didn't go so well. So desire lines didn't go as well as nature play, but we were given the opportunity to experiment, and we learnt from both of these things, and they both informed the failures and the successes informed the outcomes. Yeah. Okay. And then, as I said, we did some asset-based community development. This is bringing organisations to come in and actually, this is kids, the lady tradies, teaching kids how to make cheese boards. So we turned the market model, which is about capitalism consumption, and made it about making and learning, and that was really successful. And then we employed 230 artists. So we needed to reconfigure people's thinking about this place, and the best way to do that was creative placemaking, because only creatives can make you see places. The sausage chisel wasn't going to work. The big market wasn't going to work. But these very creative touches of magic that only artists and creatives can do made people just go, oh, whoa, I never thought I could be in this park doing this thing, seeing it this way. The Ngunnawal Elders Council were the guides of this project, so they played a significant role in this project as well, and gifted the name Nala to the park. The outcomes were amazing. 30,000 people visited the Hague Park. All those stats are kind of a little bit magical in themselves, because the 3,000% increase in play is the case because there was no play and then suddenly there was truck tons of it. But the main thing was that the women's safety map, there was not one pin on the women's safety map about this place being unsafe for 2.5 years. And then there was just one pin since then that said the lighting's not great in here. So we actually not only changed perceptions, but also the reality of that space. Since then, we've had the Hague Park markets have opened. There's been $3 million worth of investment in the space. It just shows the Hague Park. This was informed. This is a community centre, and it was named after Sue Salthouse, who was a disability advocate. So there's been investment. But if you look at the next slide, you'll also see this. And COVID made it a refuge. It became a refuge in COVID because it was outside and a safe space to be in. This is now what Hague Park looks like on Sundays, which is at the Hague Park markets. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Thanks, Sarah. We appreciate that. Last story. These two guys came to every single event we ran. They hated on every single event. They took photos of it, documented it, and sent it to government. Love them. But I got a photo of them at almost every event, and then I used them to demonstrate how committed they were to coming to all of our events. So that's the end.